Eunice was organizing her mother's recipe box when her niece walked in with a stack of printouts, screenshots from a website she'd never heard of, a cookbook pre-order page. And there, in full color, was a photo of her grandmother's caramel cake, the one that takes 2 days to make, the one she'd made for every wedding and funeral in this town for 40 years. The listing called it Savannah's Southern Signature Cake. Price, $28. Eunice recognized every word of the description. She should. Her mother had written it in that same kitchen in 1958. The woman selling it as her own creation was a former student, someone Eunice had trusted, someone she'd taught everything, and Eunice couldn't sue her. Recipes aren't protected by copyright, so she did something else instead. Eunice Prater spent 41 years teaching children how to cook. Home economics. 3 generations of students passed through her classroom at Ridgewood High. She taught them how to crack an egg with one hand and know when oil was ready just by looking at it. Most of them forgot her name within a year of graduation. That never bothered her. She didn't teach for the recognition. She taught because someone had to pass these things along. Her mother had taught her the same way, patient, repetitive, never cutting corners. The caramel cake was the crown jewel. 3 layers, homemade caramel frosting, and a process that took 2 full days if you did it right. You couldn't rush the caramel. You couldn't fake the technique. Eunice's mother had learned it from her mother, who brought it up from Tennessee in 1932 with nothing but a suitcase and a handwritten recipe card. Eunice made that cake for every important moment in Ridgewood: weddings, funerals, graduations, baby showers, retirements. For 40 years, if something mattered, her caramel cake was there. People joked that they put it in their wills. Make sure Eunice brings the cake to the service. She always did. When she retired 5 years ago, former students came back to thank her. Some of them were in their 50s now, with grandchildren of their own. She smiled, accepted their kind words, and went home to a quiet house. Her husband Lloyd had passed in 2019. Cancer took him in 8 months. Her 2 sons lived out of state and called on Sundays when they remembered. The house felt bigger every year. Eunice filled the silence with routine. Church on Sundays, garden club on Tuesdays, cooking for one, which she never got used to. She still made full recipes out of habit and dropped off containers to neighbors who didn't ask for them. That was just how she was raised. You cook. You share. You don't let people go hungry if you can help it. The doorbell rang on a Tuesday afternoon in March. Eunice wasn't expecting anyone. She wiped her hands on her apron and opened the door to a young woman holding a phone and a bright smile. "Mrs. Prater, I don't know if you remember me. Savannah Greer, class of 2008. Eunice studied her face. The name didn't ring a bell, but that wasn't unusual. She'd taught thousands of students. "I'm a content creator now," Savannah continued. "I make cooking videos, and I'm starting a new series called Learning from Local Legends. I'd love to feature you if you'd be willing." Eunice didn't know exactly what that meant, but she understood the flattery behind it. A former student, coming back to learn, coming back to remember. That didn't happen often. She should have wondered why. "Well," Eunice said, "I suppose you'd better come in." Savannah stepped into the kitchen and looked around like she was seeing something precious. She asked about the cast-iron skillet on the stove, the worn wooden cutting board, the recipe box on the counter with index cards poking out at angles. "This is exactly what I was hoping for," Savannah said. "Authentic, real, not like everything online. Authentic, real." Those words would come back to haunt her. Eunice offered her sweet tea and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Useful, seen. Like her kitchen still mattered to someone beyond herself. They agreed to monthly visits. Savannah would bring her camera, Eunice would teach. It seemed like a gift. She had no idea she was handing over everything. The first visit went well. Eunice taught Savannah how to make buttermilk biscuits from scratch. No measuring cups, just hands and instinct and 50 years of muscle memory. Savannah filmed the whole thing, asking questions between takes. Where did the recipe come from? What made it different from store-bought? How did Eunice learn to cook like this? Eunice answered everything. She talked about her mother standing at this same counter, about the way they used to make biscuits together on Saturday mornings before church, about how her grandmother added a pinch of sugar that most recipes left out. Savannah listened like it mattered. She nodded in the right places. She laughed when Eunice made a joke about burning her first batch at age 12. It felt like teaching again. It felt like being needed. Over the next several months, Eunice taught her everything: pound cake, fried chicken, peach cobbler with a lattice crust, a dozen family recipes, each one with a story attached. Each time, Savannah set up her camera on a tripod, positioned the lighting, and asked Eunice to walk through every step. Eunice noticed that the camera mostly pointed at Savannah. She stood in frame while Eunice's hands worked off to the side. When Eunice asked about it, Savannah waved it off. "That's just how these videos work. People want to see a face they recognize. But don't worry, I'll make sure everyone knows where these recipes came from." Looking back, that should have been the first warning. Savannah brought small gifts, remembered birthdays. It felt like friendship. On the 8th visit, Eunice finally shared the caramel cake. She hadn't planned to. It was her most precious recipe, the one her mother made for her wedding day, the one Eunice made when Lloyd proposed, when her sons were born, when her mother passed. It wasn't just food, it was family. But Savannah had been so respectful, so eager, and Eunice was tired of keeping things to herself. She pulled out the original recipe card, her mother's handwriting, faded but legible, dated 1958. She let Savannah photograph it. "This cake takes 2 days," Eunice said. "You can't rush the caramel. If you try to shortcut it, the whole thing falls apart." Savannah filmed every step. She asked about the history, the technique, the memories attached to each ingredient. Eunice told her all of it. At the end of the session, Savannah packed up her equipment and hugged Eunice at the door. "This is going to be beautiful," she said. "People are going to love this." Eunice believed her. She had no reason not to. That was her mistake. She watched Savannah drive away and felt proud. She had passed something along. Her mother's recipe would reach people she'd never meet. That was the whole point of teaching. She never thought to ask when the videos would go up, or what they would say, or whose name would be attached to them. Eunice didn't hear from Savannah for 8 months. A text here and there. Nothing that mattered. She assumed the videos were doing well. She assumed she'd be credited when they went up. She assumed wrong. Then her niece came to visit. Danielle was 34, a paralegal in Nashville. She drove down every few months to check on Eunice and bring groceries Eunice didn't ask for. On this particular Sunday, she walked in with a stack of printouts and a look on her face that Eunice didn't recognize. "Aunt Eunice," Danielle said, "we need to talk about something." Those 6 words changed everything. She spread the papers across the kitchen table. Screenshots, website pages, photos of food that looked familiar. "Do you know someone named Savannah Greer?" Eunice nodded. "She's a former student. She came by last year to film some cooking videos. Sweet girl." Danielle didn't say anything. She just pointed at the printouts. The first page showed a YouTube channel. Savannah's face smiled at the camera. The channel had 800,000 subscribers. 800,000! All of them watching Eunice's recipes, none of them knowing her name. The second page showed a cookbook pre-order. Savannah's Southern Kitchen, heirloom recipes from a new generation. The cover featured Savannah holding a wooden spoon, standing in a kitchen that looked nothing like Eunice's. The third page showed the table of contents. Eunice read the recipe titles out loud: buttermilk biscuits, brown sugar pound cake, peach cobbler with lattice crust, fried chicken with secret seasoning. 14 recipes in total. Every single one had come from Eunice's kitchen. Every single one had a new name. And there, on page 93, was the caramel cake. "Savannah's Southern Signature Cake," the listing said. "A 3-layer masterpiece that takes 2 days to make, handed down through generations of Southern women who understood that some things can't be rushed." Eunice recognized the words. She had said them herself, standing in her kitchen while Savannah filmed. Her mother's recipe, her grandmother's legacy, selling for $28 under someone else's name. "There's more," Danielle said quietly. She pulled up another page on her phone. A morning show segment. Regional broadcast. Savannah demonstrating the caramel cake on live television, telling the host it was her own creation. Eunice sat down. She didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, she asked Danielle to find Savannah's phone number. It took a few minutes of searching, but Danielle found it on a business website. Eunice dialed. Savannah answered on the 3rd ring. "Mrs. Prater, what a nice surprise." Eunice kept her voice steady. "I saw the cookbook, Savannah. I saw the videos. Those are my recipes." There was a pause on the other end. "Well, yes, I learned them from you. That's the whole point. I'm sharing them with a wider audience. You didn't credit me. You didn't even mention my name. Another pause. Longer this time. Mrs. Prater, I appreciate everything you taught me. I really do. But exposure doesn't pay the bills. I have a business to run. These videos, this cookbook, this is my livelihood now. Eunice gripped the phone tighter. That caramel cake is my mother's recipe. Her handwriting is on that card. You photographed it yourself. Savannah's voice turned cooler. Recipes can't be copyrighted, Mrs. Prater. I looked it up. I'm not doing anything wrong. She said it like she was proud of herself. The line went dead. Eunice set the phone on the table. She looked at the printouts spread across the surface, her mother's recipes, her grandmother's techniques, 40 years of feeding her community, all of it repackaged and sold by a woman who had smiled in her kitchen and called her a legend. Danielle reached across and squeezed her hand. There has to be something we can do. Eunice didn't answer. She just stared at the recipe card still sitting in her mother's wooden box. The handwriting hadn't faded. The memories hadn't either. Danielle made some calls the next morning. She knew a lawyer in Nashville who handled intellectual property cases. His answer was simple. Recipes can't be copyrighted. Litigation would cost more than she'd ever recover. Legally, Savannah had done nothing wrong. Eunice thanked him and hung up. So Savannah had been right. She could take 40 years of family recipes, slap her name on them, and sell them to the world. And there was nothing the courts could do about it. Eunice spent the day in her garden, pulling weeds and working through her anger. Danielle found her there in the late afternoon, sitting on the porch steps. I've been thinking, Danielle said. Savannah built her whole career on your recipes, your techniques, your family stories. She filmed it all in your kitchen. Eunice nodded but didn't look up. She has 800,000 followers because of what you taught her. People watch her because they think she's authentic. They think those recipes are hers. They do think that, Eunice said. Because she told them so. Danielle leaned forward. What if you told them different? Eunice finally turned around. What do you mean? She has a channel. You could have one too. Eunice almost laughed. I'm 69 years old. I don't know the first thing about making videos. I barely know how to check my email. You don't have to know, Danielle said. I can handle the technical parts, the filming, the editing, the posting. All you have to do is what you've always done, cook. Talk about where the recipes came from. Tell the truth. Eunice was quiet for a moment. And you think people would watch that? An old woman in her kitchen talking about her mother's recipes? I think people would watch the old woman, the one Savannah learned from, the one with the original recipe cards, the one who's been making that caramel cake for 40 years while Savannah was still in elementary school. Eunice looked out at the garden, then back at the kitchen window. She thought about her mother standing at that same counter. She thought about her grandmother making the trip from Tennessee with nothing but a suitcase and a recipe card. She thought about every wedding, every funeral, every graduation where that caramel cake had meant something to someone. And she thought about Savannah on that morning show, holding up a slice and calling it her own creation. What would we even say? Eunice asked. Danielle pulled out her phone. We start simple. You make the caramel cake. You show the original recipe card, the one with your mother's handwriting. You tell people where it really came from. You don't accuse anyone of anything. You just tell the truth, and you let them figure out the rest. Eunice was quiet for a long moment. Then something shifted behind her eyes. She stood up, walked into the kitchen, and opened her mother's recipe box. We're going to need better lighting, she said. And for the first time in months, she smiled. They filmed the first video on a Saturday morning. Danielle set up a ring light and a tripod in the kitchen. Eunice wore her usual apron, the one with the faded sunflowers that her mother had given her 30 years ago. She didn't try to look polished. She just looked like herself. The video was simple. Eunice made the caramel cake from start to finish. She talked while she worked. About her mother, about her grandmother, about the trip from Tennessee in 1932. She held up the original recipe card, her mother's handwriting dated 1958, and let the camera linger on it. She didn't mention Savannah by name, not at first. But near the end of the video, while the cake was cooling, Eunice looked directly at the camera. I taught this recipe to a lot of people over the years, she said. Most of them gave credit where it was due. But recently, someone took this recipe and a lot of others and put them in a cookbook under her own name. She called this cake her signature creation. She said it was handed down through her family. That's not true. This is my mother's recipe. This is my grandmother's legacy. And I think people deserve to know that. Danielle posted the video that night. She titled it, "The Real Story Behind Savannah's Southern Signature Cake." For 2 days, nothing happened. A few dozen views, a handful of comments from people Eunice didn't know. Danielle checked the numbers every hour. Eunice pretended not to notice. She started to think maybe this had been a waste of time. Then a food blogger in Atlanta picked it up. Her name was Carmen something. She had 300,000 followers and a reputation for calling out recipe theft. She watched Eunice's video, did some research, and posted a side-by-side comparison. Savannah's cookbook descriptions next to Eunice's original recipe cards. The wording was nearly identical in places. The misspelling of cardamom that Eunice's grandmother had always made, it appeared in both versions. Carmen's post went viral overnight. Savannah was about to have a very bad week. By morning, Eunice's video had 200,000 views. By the end of the week, it had crossed 1 million. The comments were overwhelming. People were furious on her behalf. They shared the video everywhere. They tagged Savannah directly, demanding answers. Other food bloggers joined in. They pulled up Savannah's old videos, the ones filmed in Eunice's kitchen, and pointed out all the details Savannah had quietly edited out. The recipe box in the background, Eunice's hands working off camera, the family photos on the wall that didn't belong to Savannah. A reporter from a Nashville newspaper reached out to Danielle. She wanted to interview Eunice for a feature story. The headline ran 3 days later. "Retired teacher says influencer stole her family's recipes, and she has the proof." Eunice didn't celebrate. She just kept making videos. She posted the buttermilk biscuits next, then the pound cake, then the fried chicken, each one with the original recipe card, each one with the real story. She never raised her voice. She never called Savannah names. She just told the truth, calmly and clearly, the same way she'd taught for 41 years. Savannah tried to respond. She posted a video defending herself, claiming she had adapted the recipes and made them her own. She said Eunice was exaggerating. She said this was all a misunderstanding. She had just made everything worse. The comments on her video were brutal. People posted screenshots of her old posts calling the recipes family heirlooms. They quoted her morning show interview where she called the caramel cake her own creation. They found the photo she'd taken of Eunice's mother's recipe card and pointed out that she'd cropped out the date. Her publisher released a statement 3 days later. The cookbook was being delayed indefinitely for additional review. The morning show quietly canceled her segment. They didn't announce it. They just stopped booking her. Within a month, Savannah's channel had lost 100,000 subscribers. Her cookbook pre-order page disappeared entirely. The morning show scrubbed her segments from their website. It was like they were trying to pretend she never existed. Within 2 months, she'd stopped posting entirely. Her social media went dark. Someone said she'd moved out of state. Eunice didn't bother to find out if it was true. She was too busy filming. 6 months later, Eunice's channel had 230,000 subscribers. She still didn't fully understand what that meant. But Danielle showed her the comments sometimes. People thanking her for sharing. People saying they'd tried the caramel cake and it reminded them of their own grandmothers. People asking for more. She gave them more. A new video every week. Recipes she hadn't made in years. Stories she'd almost forgotten. Danielle handled the filming and editing. Eunice just cooked and talked. It was easier than she'd expected. It was just teaching, after all. Same as it had always been. The publisher reached out in April. Not Savannah's publisher. A different one. Smaller, family-owned, based in Charleston. They wanted to put together a cookbook. Eunice's recipes, Eunice's stories, Eunice's name on the cover. Full attribution. Her mother, her grandmother, everyone who contributed. Her legacy, finally honored. Eunice agreed. They offered her an advance that made her eyes water. She tried to give half of it to Danielle, but her niece refused. "You earned this," Danielle said, "every penny." The cookbook came out in September. The cover showed Eunice in her kitchen, holding her mother's recipe box. The dedication page listed 4 generations of women, her great-grandmother, her grandmother, her mother, and herself. The caramel cake was on page 1. It sold out its first print run in 3 weeks. Eunice did a few interviews. A local morning show, not the one that had featured Savannah, a different one. The host asked her what advice she had for other people whose work had been stolen. "Tell the truth," Eunice said, calmly, clearly, with proof. People can spot a fake when you show them the real thing. She didn't mention Savannah by name. She didn't need to. Everyone already knew. The best part came in October. Danielle drove down for Eunice's 70th birthday. She brought her daughter with her. Molly was 8 years old, gap-toothed and curious, and she'd been begging to be in one of Eunice's videos for months. They filmed it that afternoon. Eunice and Molly, side by side at the counter, making buttermilk biscuits. Eunice guided her hands the same way her mother had guided hers, the same way she had tried to guide Savannah's, before everything went wrong. She told the same stories. She made the same jokes about burning her first batch. But this time, she was teaching someone who would remember where it all came from. Molly got flour on her nose and laughed so hard she almost knocked over the mixing bowl. When the video went up, it became the most watched one on the channel. People said it made them cry. People said it reminded them of learning to cook with their own grandmothers. People said they hoped Molly would keep the recipes going. Eunice hoped so too. She sat on her porch that evening, watching the sun go down over the garden. The house didn't feel so quiet anymore. The kitchen didn't feel so empty. Somewhere out there, hundreds of thousands of strangers were making her mother's recipes. They knew where they came from. They knew whose hands had shaped them first. Savannah had tried to steal her legacy. She'd almost gotten away with it. But some things can't be taken. They can only be passed along. Eunice went back inside, opened her mother's recipe box, and started planning next week's video. Her mother would have loved this. All those recipes, finally getting the credit they deserved. 4 generations of women who never stopped teaching. And now, one more learning to carry it forward.